Welcome back to Made for More. I am your host, Holly J. Moore. Made for More is a podcast where we talk about showing up as the best version of yourself, even if it's just a little bit better today than it was yesterday. Aaron Bender, are you here and are you better than you were yesterday?
Oh, absolutely. Every day is better. I was just actually talking with my wife, Abby. It's still strange to say that. We're 2 weeks in, 2.5 weeks into it, but still strange to say that a little bit. But, you know, we hit these obstacles and kind of detours and things like that. And it's interesting how our life experience and perspective lends itself to, is this good news or bad news? Or like we immediately jump to, okay, this is bad news. We've got to figure this out. And we kind of play off each other. It's like, no, this is good.
Yeah.
This is good. This is okay. It may not necessarily be good,
right,
but this is okay.
And I'm sure you attribute this shift to Made for More.
Absolutely. No, seriously. We've talked about this in previous episodes. Really? Liz and I get so much from these episodes that I had no idea when I signed up for this that it'd be like, oh, okay, life coaching every other week.
Yes. Do you know one of my best friends, Brandy, she said she faithfully and religiously listens to it every Wednesday, and then her and a friend get together and talk about it.
No.
Yes.
No, there's a Made for More book club.
Yes.
Type?
We're changing lives.
Okay. Oh my gosh.
All over the place.
Great. Rhonda also is changing lives all over the place. Her Women's Financial Wellness Center, based in Wisconsin. Now it's in all 50 states.
Yeah, they can
virtually.
work anywhere. Yeah.
They are changing lives.
They are. Yes. Certified
divorce financial analyst.
Certified divorce financial analyst.
I know it's a mouthful, and I'm sure she would say the same thing.
Yes.
But, because a few weeks ago we had the certified divorce real estate agent, Laurel Starks. That was a great conversation. Now certified divorce financial analyst, Rhonda Noordyk.
Yes. And she serves exclusively women. So, that's a little different for me because here at the firm, we represent the breadwinner of the firm. So statistically, it's more men than women, but we don't discriminate based on gender. It just happens to be that way. But she serves women exclusively. So I'm excited to talk to her about, what led her to do that. And, I don't know, I'm feeling a little bit like she's going to be really mad at me because I'm not the best. Well, I am not tasked with the finances of my household. Aaron, how does it work with you and Abby?
Oh, well, we've talked about this for years now, she and I. It's a decades-old marriage that we've got here. No,
how's it been working in the first 2 weeks?
First 2 weeks, great. Great. I don't know if you've ever heard of that before, but first 2 weeks, great.
Yes, well, that's a good sign.
No,
so
finances,
far, so good.
though. So I've owned my home 7 years. She's moved into the home, and we're making it ours. And so all of my name is on all the utilities and the mortgage and everything like that. Right. So I take care of all that. And then she takes care of all the Target curbside shopping bills, the Sprouts and the Whole Foods. As I'm sure in a lot of relationships, kind of the day-to-day stuff. Right.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I really want to ask Rhonda is, for those of us still happily married, what should we be doing now? So we'll see what she says. Rhonda, hi. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Okay, let's jump right in. You are a certified divorce financial analyst. Tell us what that means.
Yeah, well, it's a long acronym for Certified Divorce Financial Analyst. Fancy term for I love helping particularly women navigate through the financial aspects of the divorce process.
Okay, so I know that you only serve women. Tell us what gave birth to your passion for serving women.
Yeah. Well, so prior to me starting my company 10 years ago, believe it or not, I was in the financial industry for 12 years and had women come through my doors. Rhonda, I'm thinking about or contemplating going through divorce. I don't even know what questions to be asking. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I never really handled the finances. And so they found themselves in a position of feeling very disempowered. And when I left the financial industry to open up Women's Financial Wellness Center, I really knew that there was a lot of work to be done. The baseline, though, was helping improve women's confidence And I think, the divorce is as challenging and as difficult as it may be, it is a great opportunity for women to say, you know what, it's time for me to start, getting more empowered, learning about the money, and really being more independent.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I definitely want you to tell us more about the Women's Financial Wellness Center. But before we get there, I have a couple of questions. Have you found that women more often than I guess men are sort of in the dark about finances, particularly like in a marriage?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think women handle the day-to-day stuff, right? I mean, it's often the bill paying and maybe making purchases and things like that. But when we get outside of the scope of kind of the day-to-day, that's when things start to get a little bit fuzzy. And not to totally geek out and spend a ton of time on this, but Prudential had done a study in 2000, a longitudinal study. They did another one in 2010. And over that 10-year period, what they found was there wasn't a lot of change. Ultimately, the key takeaway from that study was that women lacked confidence around money, and they kind of developed a formula for it. And the formula was knowledge plus experience equals confidence. Because I think a lot of times for women, they're like, oh, well, I'm not smart. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is when you have the knowledge without the experience, it's theory, right? If we have the experience without the knowledge, it's trial and error. But when we get the two of those things working together, magical things happen, and we can accelerate women's confidence. They're showing up to the table, they're asking the right questions, they're getting a better outcome because they are no longer intimidated by the conversation about money. And I think a lot of times women put their husbands on a pedestal to say, Rhonda, he's so smart. Listen, I'm not saying he isn't smart. But I'm not intimidated by that, and I don't want you to be either. And let's give you some tools to help kind of bolster that confidence so you can show up empowered.
Absolutely. Where do you think the lack of confidence around money comes from?
It's interesting because I've done a lot of work on this over the years. And at the end of the day, there's a couple things generationally, right? Whether it's, hey, I really didn't have a lot of experience. I didn't have good role modeling. Those kinds of things. When I first started working in this industry, I'd done a lot of work around money and the psychology of money. And there was a woman that I followed who basically took our history and created a family tree, not for the purposes of lineage, but really to say, what were those mindsets, right? Were your parents entrepreneurial? Were they good savers? Right. Did they spend? And it shapes a lot of how we're wired. Yes. I remember, really quick story, I was in the process of expanding my business. I was purchasing an office, which I'd love to share at some time what that all entailed. But anyways, long story short, we were walking through, doing a final walkthrough, and I was looking at basically kind of getting some equity partners to see if they wanted to invest in my space. And there was a woman standing in my conference center that held 100 people. And she looks around, she said, Rhonda, I feel like I'm losing my breath. And I'm like, and I'm thinking like there's a medical issue, right? She goes, right. I can't even think about or imagine taking on the debt. And I was like, this is interesting. Tell me more. And what I found was that her dad had been a successful business owner, but it was feast or famine, $1 million, great years, bankruptcy, $1 million, great, and she said, just the thought of debt, I will not have any debt. And I said, well, the good news for you is I'm willing to take on the risk. I'm not afraid of debt because I don't have that trauma.
You have a different money story. Yeah,
right,
absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
And I said, and the good news is you could rent for me, right? And
yeah,
it would or win for you, and it would be a win for me. But it was in that moment that I realized, man, there is some deep-seated trauma. And I think for women that are going through divorce, a lot of that stuff has been dormant for a period of time. Maybe they had trauma around money, like, oh, thank goodness, husband's going to take care of it, so I don't have to worry about it, and I can focus over here, or on a limited basis, right?
Yeah. And
now they're having to face some of those fears or challenges or insecurities around money that they really haven't had to deal with. And there's just a lot going on, with that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So you kind of are speaking to something that I didn't really know we were going to get into, but I'm happy to get into it, which is your mindset around money really plays such a role in your tolerance for risk, in your willingness to be an active participant in the finances of your household, and like so many other things. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And and I think again, there's dynamics right within these relationships where I always say, listen, we're not going to, as a partner in a relationship, right, sit down and sing kumbaya about the finances. Somebody's always going to take the lead. It's a divide and conquer kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I think unfortunately, when women are faced with, having to revisit the financial aspect and they're going through divorce, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of uncertainty.
Right.
And, it's just, there's a lot of opportunity for us to be able to help women change that. I said when I started my business 10 years ago, I said, if I can help one woman improve her relationship with money, I've now empowered her and improved her life for a lifetime, right?
Yes.
And I have a small window like you, right? We have a small window in which we really get to pour into our clients, make a difference, make sure they're best positioned for what's next.
Yeah.
We get them on their way and then we move forward and start the process over again with somebody else, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So tell us more about the Women's Financial Wellness Center.
Yeah. So Women's Financial Wellness Center, like I said, is coming up on its 10-year anniversary, which
Congratulations.
is so cool.
Yeah.
I know.
That's
so
amazing.
Cool.
Yeah.
And I think the story behind that is at the end of the day, I wanted to be in the weeds. I wanted to be the person who was that trusted person. And so Women's Financial Wellness Center, a location, right? Multiple now virtual locations. We can work across the country, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, my mission has been to help do a couple things. Reduce financial vulnerability for women, improve their confidence, and improve their lifestyle after divorce is over. And I think the unfortunate thing for people that are going through divorce is that there's this aspect of yes, that was your lifestyle then, but guess what? You're just going to have to figure it out. You're going to have to look at your budget. You're going to have to cut coupons. It's just the way it is. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, a lot of times this moneyed spouse is over here continuing in their same lifestyle, if not improving their lifestyle. And there's just still seems to be a real disconnect. And so my company exists to be able to really just help women navigate through those pieces. Over the years, of course, my business model has evolved. And what we're doing today is really taking a position of financial advocacy for our clients. Also keep in mind, we're not coming and like taking the guys out at the knees, and we don't hate men. But there is
That was a question I had on my cards. Do you hate men?
Let's just get that out there, right, Holly? It's like, no, we don't.
Okay, that's good.
Right? I mean, the guys need help too. God bless them. I mean, they need help too. But I just know that for me, I have planted my flag from very early on to say my heart and my passion is to help the women, help them get a better outcome and what their decisions mean for them, and help them understand the numbers so that they're in a good position when it's over. So that advocacy piece really has become very clear over the last decade that that's a huge opportunity. Over the years, I've been able to help in working in conjunction with the attorneys, working with my clients to really be able to move, millions, $25+ million into the hands of women that really otherwise would have been left on the table had they walked away. And I think there's a balance to that, right? It's not coming in and saying, let's just tick everybody off and let's, get aggressive and get nasty. I think we as women have an opportunity to learn, how do we negotiate? How do we lean in, maybe even smile, talk firm, and move the needle, move the chess piece, so that we're getting a better outcome and so that we're not living off of rice and beans, after the divorce is over.
Yeah. So I have to ask the question because my work, I'm all about like everybody, living up to their highest potential and sort of being empowered to use all the gifts and skills that they were born with or that they've acquired over time. And so a lot of my work as a lawyer, because we actually, my law firm, my podcast is like, let's help everybody. But my law firm actually you might feel like you're in enemy territory here. My law firm represents the breadwinner of the family. So statistically, it happens to be more men. And the reason why that has become my niche is because I got so frustrated at the beginning of my career. I was 26 years old starting my own law firm. I was a young mother, so I feel like I attracted a lot of like young mothers, stay-at-home moms. And over time, I became so frustrated and disillusioned that their whole plan for their life and their whole plan for their financial security was to rely on the support check. And some of them had skills, and some of them were very intelligent, very capable, and I never believe it was out of malicious intent or anything else other than fear, but they would refuse to go to work. They would refuse to ever like empower themselves. And I just became so frustrated over that. And that was actually kind of what gave rise to my like shifting my whole niche to the breadwinner. So is that a conversation that you ever have with these women? Is like, okay, yes, you will get what's right in the divorce. You will get financial support because maybe the playing field is not level due to, being out of the workforce or this lack of confidence around the finances, that kind of stuff. But is the conversation ever like, okay, but what are you doing long term? What are you really going to do to empower yourself so that you can stand on your own 2 feet one day?
Yeah. Absolutely. And I'm so glad that we're having this conversation because I look at the income piece as really a multi-pronged approach, right? So it's like, okay, I believe that with support, there's always kind of a best and worst case scenario. And we can have conversation about what numbers we're using for that. Okay, we work on that piece. Then the other, where else is there going to be income coming from? Is it a 1099? Is it a W-2? Are you going to, start a business? Like, I do think that there needs to be income coming from multiple sources. Yeah. And sometimes it's, investment property. Sometimes it's savings or non-qualified money if they're, pre-59 and a half that they can access that will help supplement. But absolutely that is part of the conversation because that support's not going to last forever. And so if they aren't doing anything to better themselves above and beyond that, it's okay, 10 years has gone by, all the, the kids are gone, the alimony has expired, and now what? And so absolutely, I think it's a really important conversation, for them to be having as well. And it really is in their best interest to be having those conversations with me, with themselves, like, what is it you want, right? What do you want to be doing and what does that look like? And I think that, for the most part, there is certainly a handful of people that are like, I don't want to work no matter what. But the majority of the women that I work with and that I tend to attract are the ones that are like, listen, I know and I want to work. I just haven't. And now I'm afraid because there's this gap in which how do I get retooled? How do I get back into that? And, oh, by the way, the responsibilities that I had as a full-time parent aren't going away.
Right. Yes.
Because their ex-spouse still oftentimes has a very demanding career.
Right.
And so it's definitely a conversation, but I'm not like, hey, take the support and don't ever work. I mean, find something. And if you don't have to work and the numbers do work out, then find something that you're passionate about.
Right. Yes.
And volunteer or do something.
Yes.
But yes, it is very much part of the conversation.
So, Rhonda, I know you have a fantastic podcast called Disrupting Divorce: Conversations for Women. Tell us a little bit about your podcast.
Yeah. So I started my podcast 6 years ago, and we originally started under Divorce Conversations for Women, which was great. But I recently rebranded within the last year to be Disrupting Divorce: Conversations for Women. And a small tweak, but very intentional. And the reason for it was because, from my perspective, disruption means how do we challenge the status quo? How do we look at the way that things have always been done and make them more efficient? Look at systems and processes and, essentially make them better. And I think you probably have seen this too, where, again, having done this for a while, one of the trends that we've seen over the last couple of years is more and more people kind of endorsing mediation or endorsing alternative dispute resolution methods. And I think that's good for some people. But at the end of the day, I'm like, yes, and, right? I mean, the disrupting thing is, listen, mediation might not be all that it's cracked up to be. In some situations, it's a waste of time and money and energy.
It's not for everyone.
It's not for everybody. And I feel like people are really starting to the more people that get into the space, the more, attorneys, the more CDFAs, the more coaches, the more that are like, oh, this is a great opportunity and low-hanging fruit for us to be able to, capture market share. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
And so I really have felt like disrupting is, challenging the status quo, asking the right questions, making sure that we're really taking a stand on who we partner with and who we're recommending. And it's not just these, I'm going to endorse everybody because I feel like that's the right thing to do. If what we're seeing is not in alignment with where we're headed, I'm not endorsed. For me personally, I'm not endorsing them.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that. Yeah. It does seem that more people are getting into the space and there's sort of new roles being created within like the divorce industry. So I definitely see where you're coming from there. But you are a disruptor and you are an innovator for sure, because you've come up with this really cool thing called the bridge method. Tell us what the bridge method is.
Yeah, no, thank you for asking. So the bridge method was a way to articulate what I've really been doing for the last decade, right? You're like, this needs a name, right?
Yeah.
And so we came up with the bridge method really as a duplicatable way to help women go step by step through the process, to help them know what's the next best thing that they can be doing. So I love acronyms. I have a ton of them that I work with. And some of my clients are like, can you just give us like a list of all the acronyms that you use? I'm like, great idea.
Yeah. Little dictionary, acronym dictionary.
Exactly. That's right. So bridge the B is breathe and build your team. So a lot of times when people reach out, they haven't necessarily hired attorneys yet. They're trying to navigate through those pieces. They don't even know what they don't know, right? So it's like, okay, let's get a lay of the land and let's build your team. From my perspective, the essential pieces are legal, financial, emotional as a baseline. Yeah. And I always tell people you can dial up or dial down the level in which you need support from each of those key areas.
Right. I love
then
that.
We move on to, thank you. Then we move on to the R, which is review the financials. So this is where it's gathering and organizing, of course, the documents, labeling them in a way that makes sense, but then also taking a look at the budget, what, current expenses and then projected expenses. So that, again, helps people, and it's not just for women, right? I mean, it helps them say, what expenses am I going to have moving forward that I don't have now?
Yeah.
What do I have now that I might not have later? So they really get a good idea of what they need, because fear, is not gender specific, right? So, I mean, the guys often have fear too. It just manifests itself in a little bit of a different way.
Totally. And sometimes they're unwilling to admit that they have fear.
Yeah. It's really true. Yeah. So then we've got the R for review the financials and that piece of it. I is identify the gaps. So this is where, again, I'm working a lot with attorneys to be able to say, okay, here's some of the gaps that I'm seeing. How do we best approach, getting this information? And unfortunately, I don't know what you've seen on your end, but unfortunately, there's a lot of, misperception about what transparency actually happens as people are going through divorce. It's not like, hey, we're just gonna, everybody's gonna be transparent and, all of the cards are gonna be at the table from the beginning. Sometimes people hold some of those cards close to the vest.
No,
Sometimes
I've never seen that ever, Rhonda. That has never happened in my 17 years as a divorce attorney. I have no idea what you're talking about.
That's right. I'm totally crazy.
Yes. That must only happen to you.
That's right. Totally. And of course, I have an acronym for that, which I call the DAM method.
Okay.
And I don't subscribe to the DAM method. It's dodge the disclosure. Avoid getting assets valued.
Yeah.
And misrepresent information.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, in my experience, like, it just prolongs the litigation, drives up everybody's attorney's fees. So just for the record, I don't subscribe to that either. But I may have seen it a time or two.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And so we work really hard to just, kind of get some information. One of the things that we're seeing a trend as of probably the last couple of years, and I know you are probably too, is the Bitcoin, the crypto, trying to get a handle on that stuff that's kind of been off the radar.
Right.
For a long time. So in the identify gaps, what we're doing there is we're identifying gaps in income.
Yeah.
Right? Income. How do we close the gap? Kind of like what we talked about earlier, looking at that multi-pronged approach. Is there a gap in confidence? How do we close that? Gap in transparency, and then a gap in information. Do we need to look at, more formal discovery, meaning the attorney? Or is there a private investigator that maybe we need to? And again, evaluating some of those options. Do we need to get the boat valued?
Right.
Do we need to get the tools valued, the business? And so I really end up kind of working with all of those ancillary professionals to help close the gap, get the information that then I can do a deeper analysis and help my client understand, once we get that information, what does that mean for you? Yeah. Not, hey, you're getting a good deal, when she doesn't even know if she's getting a good deal. I mean, it doesn't matter how many zeros are in the bank account if people don't know what it means for them.
Right? Yeah, that's very true.
D is dial in the data, kind of demystify the numbers. So this is where it's, child support, alimony, and property division. And I know that there's some aspects of this that obviously are on the legal. My perspective, though, the lens in which I'm looking at everything is obviously through the financial. So we're looking at property division. What does that mean for you? What are your goals? And then same thing with support. What does this mean for you, and how do we navigate through those pieces? And are there additional questions we need to be asking to help further understand what the options are? G is guide to finish strong, which is, okay, as we're nearing the end of that process, how do we make sure that all the I's are dotted, T's are crossed, details related to that. I'm usually reviewing the marital settlement agreement portion on the financial side to weigh in on if there's maybe some little details or nuances that might help them after the divorce is over.
Okay.
And then, so things like suggesting apps for variable expenses for the kids, or boundaries around spending on certain things for the kid. So there's just little things that tend to make their life a little bit easier.
Right.
And then the E, as we wrap up the bridge method, is exhale. And it's, okay, what is your post-divorce checklist of all the things that need to get wrapped up? How can I help introduce you to kind of that post-divorce team, whether it's financial, estate planning, some of those kinds of things, and make a seamless baton handoff so that as they're moving forward with that next phase, that they're in a really good spot. And so, we've been running the bridge method. We do it in a variety of different formats, one-on-one, group, and then a hybrid of the two, but it's been amazing. It just gives people, what's the next thing?
Right. A framework.
Framework.
I think so often, our clients and everyone going through a divorce, I think that's like the biggest frustrating thing, is they just kind of feel like they're in this abyss of I don't know what the next step is. When will this ever end? What's happening, so I love that you've kind of developed this framework, and people sort of have a structure around the process, that encompasses all the different facets, like legal, emotional, financial. I love that. And so I think that's really helpful. I love that you've done that. So for people, because we have a lot of listeners that aren't necessarily going through a divorce, they're still married. They're still hopefully happily married. So for those people, what should they be doing now in those women, let's just say, what should they be doing now to make sure that if they ever do find themselves in a divorce, or, sort of like looking at this picture and suddenly realizing, I don't really know about the finances. I don't have confidence about what's going on with the assets and debts of the marriage. What should those people be doing now?
Yeah. So I would say, from my perspective, it's asking questions, getting curious. I think unfortunately a lot of times people are either going to move toward the things that bring them pleasure or away from the things that bring them pain. And sometimes if people are happily married, they're like, it's working.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
That's right.
Yeah.
But I think at the end of the day, right, I mean, it's pretty telling when they should be able to ask questions. Doesn't necessarily mean that they have to know every single detail about every single piece of the finances, but they at least need to be able to know where to look and who to ask. And I think that's just, that's a good framework. And again, I mean, nobody's really sitting down most of the time once a week and saying, let's go over the finances, right?
Right.
But I mean,
nobody except my husband. And he's like, you're not listening again. I'm like, I'm sorry. I started to tune out once you said money. Yeah.
Oh, no, for sure. But, it's rare, right? And so for the people that are in that space, great. But for most people, that's not really the case. And,
right.
And I just think, we can't, kind of how we started this conversation, we can't just rely on the person that we're in this relationship with to carry all of the weight related to that. Because even if it doesn't end in divorce, it may end in death.
Yes.
In fact, I just met with a widow today. As a woman that, went to our church, and her husband got killed in a car accident. 2 minor kids, right?
Yeah.
A little bit of a different strategy in a sense with the divorce, right?
Right.
But a lot of similarities.
Yes.
And thankfully, she had access to a lot of the information that she needed.
Right.
And they did have conversations about money. So she wasn't in the dark. Had she been,
yeah. Right.
disaster, right?
Yeah. That's a fantastic point. It's like, you've got to take somewhat of an active role, not just for divorce, but also I have several friends recently, so horrible, young ladies who both have lost their husbands. And it's like, it's very scary.
Yeah.
So that's an excellent point.
Yeah. And I think, too, for me, like one of the things I've done over the years, kind of just having done this work for so long and kind of knowing, what happens a lot of times is I'm like, I'm just going to put myself in these positions where I can learn and I can ask questions. So like I was saying before, I bought an office. I didn't tell anybody I was going to have those conversations. I got the information. I was negotiating the deals. And then I said to my husband, oh, by the way, I think we should buy an office. And I've done my homework and here's why. Yeah. And I got his buy-in on it, right?
Right.
Same thing with buying a vehicle. I would go to the dealership by myself, married woman, right? And I'm like, listen. And thankfully, my husband is great. Like, he's like, hey, you go. I trust you. This is going to be awesome. And we go to sign the paperwork on the vehicle. And he says to the guy, the finance manager, like, hey, how many times do you have women come in here that like have bought a car and their husband has never seen the car?
Yeah.
And the look on the guy's face was like, he thought he was going to be in trouble, right?
Yeah.
And my husband finds that humorous. He's like, no, I just was kind of curious, And we go, the first time he saw the car was when we went out to the lot to drive it home. And he was like, oh, way to go, babe. Like, nice job.
Right.
But we have to, as women, afford ourselves and take those possibilities and opportunities when we can. Because here's the thing it did for me, Holly. I now know that, I'm not planning on getting divorced, but if something happened where my husband passed away, I'm like, you know what? I bought an office. You know what? I bought a car. I might not know everything, but I know I can do it.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we just need to stop waiting for something bad to happen.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Excellent point. Yes. Let's not wait until we're in that spot where we have no other choice. Like, we need to empower ourselves now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a great point. Well, Rhonda, thank you so much. Thank you for the work that you've been doing and will continue to do. And thank you for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. What a great conversation today. And thank you as well.
I have just a little bit more to say. There is a distinct difference between delegation and abdication. Delegation is when you're still responsible for something, but you ask somebody to help you with it. Abdication is where you take something and just completely remove it from your responsibility and your awareness. I love that Rhonda gave us permission to essentially divide and conquer, right? Because we all live in the real world with real life responsibilities and kids and jobs and so many things going on in life. And it would be unrealistic to think that both spouses need to completely handle the finances. And so I love that Rhonda gives us permission to divide and conquer. But I think the biggest takeaway is, even if you're happily married and not facing a divorce, you never know what life is going to throw at you. And it's really important to just delegate those tasks, but still ask the questions, be aware, still kind of know what's going on, because you don't want to end up in a situation where you have no other choice but to try and figure it out and pick up the pieces without the knowledge and awareness. And as always, never ever forget, you were made for more.